Hi everyone, so I just got back from the Mario movie and I had to go and get the brand new Mario movie toys while I was out at a quick trip to Target, and I wanted to show off a new project that I've been working on for a little bit with said toy. So here I am unboxing it, or struggling a little bit with it, but getting it out. Overall, I think that this toy is super cool, and you'll see in a little bit some more features with it. I think it's overall really well made and has a lot going on, but one thing that's kind of missing with it is it feels kind of empty just being just the figure and just the flashlight, and so I wanted to add a little something to it. However, I got an idea. I know how to 3D print, and so I can fix that problem of the figure feeling a little lonely. And so I got the idea, you can see it falling down here, I got the idea to make a background stand for the figure. Here are the quick schematics that I drew up for it, and these will be available along with the files on Thingiverse and Things after this video goes up. Up here is the base, and you can see it's 80 by 80 millimeters with 2 in the picture, but I ended up going with 3 female and male peg and holes. Here is the background that you can see. I tried to make it look like a typical Mario level with the flagpole and the bricks. I actually decided to take out the pipe, and I'll do the pipe a little bit later in a later project. So going on with the modeling, I decided to do the base first. I started off with that 80 by 80 measurement that I said before, and I actually went with calipers and got that measurement by looking at the figure itself and seeing what would really work in space. I kind of gave a good little bit on each edge of the figure. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out that brickwork that you see on the bottom of a Mario level, and since the brickwork is the actual base itself is 80 by 80, I knew that really easily I could make each brick a rectangle and have it as 10 by 20 millimeters, and this would make it a really easy number to go with. And since it's that 20 by 10 number, I know that in order to get the halfway bricks that you can see me making right here on the edges, I can actually go make that a 10 by 10 square. And so that 10 by 20 and that 80 by 80 are all really easy whole numbers that it's really easy to make quick calculations off the top of your head, and it makes the pattern really replicatable. So that's why I went with the numbers that I did. And you can see here that I'm kind of laying everything out. The first 2 layers I'm heavily dimensioning, so that the bottom layers I can easily just go in with the lines as you're seeing here and quickly throw those in. And then I can actually go in with lines from the top and use the cut command to instantly get the brick layers, which you can see now. I didn't show the whole process because I didn't want you to have to go in and see me individually draw all these lines and cut them out. But this is the final brick work as it seems on the final model. And then after that, I went into the extrude, and I just did a very tiny extrude for each of those bricks. And then what I plan to do after I extrude these, and you'll see in the next step, is that I went in with the fillet command and the chamfer command, and gave a chamfer on each edge of these bricks to give them an inset over each other so that you could see that intricate brick pattern. The fillet itself is a 0.25 millimeter chamfer, which gives it a very small detail, but it's really cool in the final model, and I hope if you print this that you see exactly what I'm talking about, where it doesn't take a lot to really show off that detail, which is cool. Again, I cut out all of the bricks so you didn't have to see me do each one individually, but I did each brick individually as its own extrusion, and then I went in and did each layer as its own fillet. Once everything was done, I went in and I redid the entire base geometry so that I could get a giant chamfer for the entire base itself, and you can see that here, to give the edge something nice to offset from the background, which I will do in the next step. So this is me finalizing up the base and getting it ready so that I can then start drawing the background, which is the flagpole and the brickwork. With the base done, I've decided to start working on the background. To start off working on the background, I use a construction line to offset all of the details just a hair bit away from the base to make sure that as the base prints, the actual dimensions are never going to be perfect to that 10 millimeters, even though That's what we'd like. As the printer squashes and stretches the plastic, you're never going to get that. And so I like to give a 0.5 millimeter tolerance to pretty much every piece that I make. I know you can get more specific into tolerances the more you work with your printers, but I like to work a more general kind of number into my designs because I really haven't made that many custom designs myself, and also if it isn't broken, don't fix it, you know. So here I am making the block that supports the actual flagpole itself, and then using some, again, very easy numbers to kind of make that flagpole off of that, so that the math isn't very complicated. I know that as I keep going with this design, since Onshape, the software that I'm using for this particular project, is parametric, I can go back and change any of these values if I don't like them, and it will update everything to go along with that. Actually, to kind of jump way ahead into the project, the actual pegs that I made to connect the base to the background were improperly sized, and so I had to go back and fix those after they were done, and it'll update pretty well. Here I am putting the flagpole on top of the actual flag base, and then right after this construction line right there is what I'm using to put the actual flag onto said flagpole. And I'm using two lines and making them tangent off of each other so that they can I can adjust the point where they intersect, and that will change the dimensions of the flag for me, so I don't have to go in and actually choose the size of the flag sides themselves. It's really easy, and Onshape makes it pretty nice. You can see me there adjusting it as I decide what I kind of want the flag to look like, looking at the whole geometry itself. And these dimensions you'll see aren't actually on the dimension sketch that I made, because these are all things that I'm deciding as I draw it, and it's more of the art to the science of the engineering I've been doing here. Now I'm moving on to the brickwork with the question mark block and the two regular blocks right next to it. I really like that pattern. You can really do any kind of pattern. You could do like 3 question mark blocks or 2 question mark blocks, or all of the regular bricks, but I really like the 2 bricks on the side with the question mark block in the middle. Again, these numbers are all pretty arbitrary that I'm just choosing to see how they view in space. And I'm kind of using that bottom block as a basis because I want them to be a little bit smaller than that block at the bottom, because that's typically how it looks in game, because we're trying to get like that little bit of a like kind of perspective look on the level. And because I already made those blocks and I picked the arbitrary numbers that I mentioned beforehand, I can then really easily calculate what the brickwork numbers are going to be and do exactly the same steps that I did for the base of the model. I originally was going to go in to Tinkercad after this model was finished up and put in the question mark on the block, but the details were starting to get too small for the printer to handle, and I actually think it looks a little bit cuter to not have the logo on there because it's a little bit more it's a very small detail once it comes out in the actual sketch, because we're talking about, you know, single millimeters. So now that that's all done, I extrude all of that backwards so that the sketch stays on the front portion of the background, but that the background itself goes backwards, so all of that pops forward. And that finishes up the background. Now I've skipped ahead a little bit to go more into the actual detailing on the background itself. Here, again, exactly the same as the base. I'm doing the brickwork in the exact same way I did before, but the reason that I'm doing it here is not actually for ease, it's actually so that I can do special details on them. I'm actually mixing a fillet and a chamfer together to get a very dynamic edge. It was something that I wanted to try on this project to see if it would be useful on any projects that I go forward with, because I wanted the edges of the blocks to look rounded, kind of like a regular brick that you would see on a building or something, but I wanted those edges to have that sharp chamfered edge, kind of like a trowel in actual grout on an actual brick in real life. And I know this is just like a Super Mario figure stand, but that level of detail was really cool for me to try out in this project, and so I hope you agree that it came out pretty well. in the final model. So you can see me here doing that exact same thing with that 0.25, I believe, millimeter chamfer on all of those edges, and a 0.25 radius on the fillet that I'm doing on each of the edges that get a fillet. And so that finalizes up the brickwork and the bottom base of the actual flagpole. So all of that work is finalized, and there's the question mark, and then now I'm working on the flagpole, and the flag top. So the flag, I wasn't exactly sure whether I wanted to do a chamfer or a fillet, so I was kind of looking at it visually. You can see me there, and I end up going with a fillet at the end of the day because I wanted it to look more smooth, as it's supposed to be like a fabric material as opposed to like the metal. And I had already decided that I wanted to do a fillet on the actual pole itself, because the pole is supposed to be rounded like a cylinder, so the fillet kind of fits more with that. The flag pole top, that part, I ended up going back and completely changing what you're seeing here, and I did not record it, but I went in with another construction line and actually made a sphere, so it really pops out compared to everything else in the drawing. I wanted to accomplish that by just using a fillet on the material that you're seeing here, but that didn't work, so I had to go in and make a sphere myself. And then for the final model, but you can't see it in the footage here, I went in and I merged the pole and the base together so that when the fillet and the chamfer hit each other, it made a rounded chamfer. It's kind of hard to describe, but you can see it if you look at the final model, where it looks really, really sharp. It really looks like a pole going into a square base. I really like that. So here, moving on to the one part in the drawing that I haven't talked about yet, and that's how I make the peg into the hole part. I make a lot of these in a lot of my projects, and so I kind of have a little bit more experience dealing with, like the peg in the hole. And like I mentioned before, I like to give a 0.5 millimeter tolerance onto all the holes that I make, and so in this case that would give me 0.25 on each side of the peg clearance, and that ended up being exactly perfect. With a little bit of work, you can get it in the background into the base with minimal effort, but it stays in there, absolutely no glue, and it stays pretty sturdy, which I'm very proud of. So here you can see me modeling these up. Again, picking these numbers kind of arbitrary as I go along, just kind of eyeballing them based on experience and what I think is going to work well. And again, since this is a parametric model, I can go back and change these circles, because if you can see, that middle one is actually a little bit lower than it should be. It's not at that 5 millimeters. It's at like 4.5 or something like that. And so you can visually see here in the model that it's off. However, that does get fixed later on, that I go back. Unfortunately, I don't have that filmed. So I started off with the male component because I wanted those to be smaller than the hole on the base, and so that would lead into what size I was going to make the hole on the base itself. And the reason I did this rather than having the pegs on the base was so that you could print the entire model without using any supports. I'm a big proponent of making 3D printable models that don't have supports unless they absolutely need them. And so for this model, I knew absolutely there was a way that I could print this without having any supports. And so if I left the holes on the base itself, they could print without any supports in the middle, because they're not large enough to require that to complete the circle. So you can see me doing the exact same process that I did before with the construction lines into the circles. I'm making all of those circles equal and dependent on each other, so if I go back and change them, they will be perfect. Now that I have everything finished here, I am going to go into and color these, kind of a rough look for how I want them to be once I finish the entire model and have it all printed and painted. And then I'm going to drop these into an assembly file so that I can put them together and kind of visually see how they're going to look. And this will tell me whether or not I've done everything I wanted to with the model and get it ready so that I can put it into my printer and get it printed and ready to get painted. So for this project, I decided to use two different filaments. The first one that you're seeing now is Inland Light Blue PLA, And here is what it looks like as my paint swatch frog. Here is the actual base printing, and here is it afterwards. I decided to go with the light blue because it's the thing that's going to make up the bulk of the color, and I'll paint on top of it. The second color, I didn't actually have any brown to make up the brick, so instead I used some Jessie white PLA that I had lying around, and you can see its paint swatch going around. Here's the time lapse, a little bit rougher than the other one. I had to use my old ender, and if you're interested in seeing a little bit more about my new ender, you can expect a video about that coming soon. But now that I have the two files ready to, or the two prints ready to go, I'm going to take them over and I'm going to paint them. For the actual painting, I'm going to be using paint pens, which I know for most 3D printing, most people would use actual acrylic paint. However, this project is not big enough where I felt that it warranted it, and since it has a lot of smaller details, it was a lot easier to go in with a paint pen and paint in those details by hand than it was to go in with a brush. Now, granted, I am by no means a professional in any way when it comes to painting. I am very much a novice, and so that's why I find it a lot easier to go in and paint it by hand with one of the paint pens. And you can see my low level of skill in using a paint pen is showing, as the final base looks very much like it was drawn with a pen. The actual brickwork looks a lot better as the ink in the pen got shaken up as I was working, and so you can see me going in and coloring in that brickwork. And like I mentioned when I was going through the time lapse of the actual construction of the model, that detailing with those chamfers really comes out well as you're painting it. It doesn't require a lot of extra work. If I had more time and I decided to put more effort into the actual painting of this base, I could have done an initial black coat of paint with a brown coat to go on top just to give it more detail. This probably would have brought out more of that chamfer and that inside edge that I was talking about beforehand, but I decided, since I wanted to get this video out there for everybody, and my skills with painting are definitely not up to snuff with what is required to do something like that, I decided to just skip it and go right to brown. So here I'm finishing up with the brown on the base, and while that's drying, I'll move over to the background piece and I'll start doing the brown on that. So now moving on to painting the brown parts of the base. I start off with the actual brickwork, as it's going to be a little bit more complicated than the base of the flagpole. And what I actually use is a technique that I had first tried out in this project, and that is taping off some of the edges and coloring onto those edges. I feel that it gave me a little bit more coverage with the paint while not compromising the actual look of the final model, and I'm very happy with how this turned out. Obviously, since I'm still new, you can see specks of brown and some of the other colors on the final base, and a actual paint layer probably would have worked a lot better than painting it on by hand with a paint pen, like mentioned beforehand. But overall, I think the final effect is very nice and exactly what I was going for. And very similarly to the base, you could have done a black coat on the bottom and a brown coat on top of that to get a more pronounced difference with that chamfer that I was talking about beforehand, but that is completely up to you and based on how much effort you want to put into this project. Now that that's finished, we're going to move on to the silver, and you can see me shaking up the pen, it's a little bit old. And I'm going to move in and start quickly brushing on a lot of that silver. The silver paint pen is a lot more oily, and so I was able to just kind of glide it over that section. And since I printed this in a way where this is on the y-axis, I was able to just glide the pen over those long stretches of printed filament, and so it made it a lot easier to not overextend on the silver. So the silver is a lot cleaner than some of the other colors that you'll see on this this model. After the silver on the pole is done, I move on to the gold of the actual flagpole top. So here I am after the gold had finally been shaken out, and it still had a little bit left to get out, but you can see as I go in there. I did an original coat of gold that you can see here, and then later after that had dried, I went in with another coat to make sure that it was really covered, to make sure that gold coloring was really pronounced. Moving on with the painting, I decided to go with the green for the flag since we do have Luigi here as the main figure. However, you can paint this any color you'd like. You could also do black for the regular color that the flagpole is, black before the level is completed. Or if you have this as a model for any figure, you could do any character that you'd like with any color. That's why I didn't actually put in a specific symbol on the flagpole so that you can do whatever you want. I wanted to actually go in and put a sticker on there, but I really like the look of the just raw like plastic with paint on it, so I didn't want to put a sticker on there. But you could, similar to like a Lego or something like that, you could put a sticker on here to make that look a little bit nicer. I'm just coloring this in here with that green color to look like Luigi, because figure's Luigi. So, the final color for this project is going to be the yellow of the golden question mark block. I decided to go with yellow instead of gold because often in the games the question mark block has a more pronounced yellow color and less of an actual gold like the top of the flagpole does, and so I did want to make sure that these were a different color. Similar to before, I'm using that painter's tape method where I tape off a little bit of the base so that I don't get the yellow coloring all over. And again, with a little bit more work, I could have put a black layer to give the edges between the blocks a lot more of a pronounced look. However, with the speed and final product, I just didn't really want to go that much into detail with this. And I'm very happy with how this turned out. So now that all of the pieces are painted, I'm going to let them dry for a little bit, and then I'm going to go forward with the assembly. So here we are with the assembly. I have the base plate and the background piece. You can see it's pretty easy to see where the holes go into with their male and female counterparts. I recommend using a rubber mallet because then you can get a little bit more of a big push into your 3D printed plastic there. You don't have to worry about cracking it, and you can use a lot less force to do more of the work. I did most of that off camera as I didn't think that it would come out very well in the audio, and here is the finalized figure. So I want to do a little demonstration showing off how the final thing turned out. I'm very proud of how it came from in my head just looking at the figure in the store to final product, and I also think it's very cool to show what it's like to take an idea that you have, make it in a 3D model space, and then actually print it and paint it and put it together yourself and see how it will interact with the actual real space. To end off the video, I want to say thank you very much for watching. If you have any ideas for future content that you'd like to see me do, or anything that you'd like to see me 3D print, please leave a comment down below. And if you enjoyed the video, like, share, comment, all that regular stuff that you hear other YouTubers say. So thank you very much for watching.